A millionaire humiliated a beggar in front of his daughter. Days later, he was shocked to discover who the beggar really was. Vincent's mansion was a work of ostentation. The crystal chandeliers illuminated the polished marble floor, and the walls were decorated with paintings by renowned artists. Everything in that house screamed wealth, but the environment was far from conveying comfort. The silence was heavy, as if the walls kept dark secrets. In the center of the main room, Vincent entered with firm steps, his presence dominating the space, and his cold gaze fell upon Madison, his 10-year-old daughter, who was sitting on the couch with a small storybook in her hands. Madison seemed out of place in that environment. Her feet swung slightly in the air, and she kept her gaze fixed on the book, trying to ignore Vincent's imposing shadow that now loomed over her. "Madison, what did I say about this habit of yours of sticking your nose where you're not called?" Vincent's voice was cutting, full of authority and contempt. "Do you think it's fair that I work so hard to support this house, for you to go around playing the Good Samaritan?" The girl slowly raised her eyes, frightened, but said nothing. She knew that no matter what she answered, Vincent would always find something to criticize. "I was just trying to help, Dad. That lady needed food, and I had an apple in my backpack." "It was nothing major," she mumbled, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Nothing major," Vincent repeated, his voice rising in tone. He let out a bitter laugh and shook his head. "It's precisely that kind of thinking that will ruin you, Madison. You behave like a poor person. I give you everything, absolutely everything, and you insist on acting like a beggar. Do you think that's how people will respect you, admire you? How shameful." Madison shrank back on the couch, her father's words penetrating deep like sharp blades. She felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked rapidly to hide them. She knew Vincent hated to see her cry. "Sorry, Dad, I just thought—" "Thought what?" Vincent interrupted, drawing even closer. He was now leaning forward, his expression laden with anger. "Thought that giving food to a stranger is what a girl of your standing should do? Do you have any idea what people would say if they saw that? Oh, the daughter of the great Vincent acting like a commoner. Is that what you want? To be mocked? You're pathetic, Madison, simply pathetic." Madison clutched the book to her chest, trying to find strength in the few words she could read to herself. She wanted to shout, to tell her father he was wrong, but the courage never came. The only thing she could do was mutter, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to be good." "Good?" Vincent exploded, taking a step back and throwing his hands up, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You think goodness puts food on the table? That goodness pays for these walls? Don't be foolish, Madison. Goodness is for the weak, for the poor. You don't have the luxury of being good. You have to be strong, you have to be superior. But looking at you now, all I see is a great disappointment." Madison could no longer hold back her tears. They streamed silently down her face as she looked at the floor, her small body trembling with every word from Vincent. He stared at her for a moment. His face hardened before shaking his head and turning toward the door. "I don't want to hear anything more about this. If I find out you've been giving alms or helping anyone else, Madison, you'll regret it. Do you understand me?" She nodded silently, not brave enough to respond. When Vincent finally left, slamming the door behind him, the silence returned to the room, but it didn't bring peace. Madison remained seated on the couch, clutching the book like a shield. Her father's words echoed in her mind, crushing any remnant of happiness she might have felt before. She looked out the window, where sunlight timidly filtered through the curtains, and wished she was anywhere else but there. Deep down, Madison knew she couldn't change who she was. Her kindness wasn't something she could simply erase, no matter how much Vincent insisted it was wrong. But at that moment, the 10-year-old girl felt the weight of a struggle much greater than herself, a struggle that made her question whether her father's love was something she would ever truly deserve. The next day, Madison returned from school with light steps, though she knew her home was not a welcoming place. However, the 10-year-old girl had something inside her that her father could never erase, a natural kindness that overflowed in small gestures. As she walked through the square near her house, she caught sight of a group of beggars sitting in the shade of a tree. Their clothes were ragged, and their faces showed the weariness of those who faced difficulties every day. Something in their sad gazes deeply touched Madison's heart. She opened her backpack and took out the money she saved for school weeks. Her father gave her a generous amount for small expenses, but she never felt comfortable spending on unnecessary things. Madison approached the beggars with a shy smile, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hi, are you hungry? I can buy a snack for all of you." The faces lit up immediately. A gray-haired man with weather-beaten skin was the first to respond, his voice hoarse but filled with gratitude. "You would do that for us, girl? No one ever looks at us, let alone offers something like that." Madison nodded resolutely. "Of course, wait here, I'll be right back." She walked to a nearby diner, and with the money she had, bought sandwiches, juices, and some fruit for the group. When she returned and handed out the snacks, the smiles and thanks were so many that Madison felt her heart warm. Seeing those people happy over something so simple made her forget for a moment all the harsh words Vincent had said to her the night before. "You deserve it," she said, smiling as she watched them eat. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." A younger man, sitting in the corner, stood up and placed one of his hands on Madison's shoulder. "You're a good girl. The world needs more people like you. Never lose that, you hear?" Madison smiled but didn't respond. She knew that maintaining her kindness would be a constant battle at home, but those words encouraged her. With a shy wave, she said goodbye to the group and headed back home. As she entered the mansion, the smile on her face began to fade. The heavy atmosphere that always hung there greeted her like a dark cloud, and Madison knew deep down that something was wrong. Vincent was standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed and face stern. His posture was that of someone who had been waiting for her, like a judge ready to pass sentence. "So this is how you spend the money I give you?" Vincent began, his voice firm and cold. His eyes shone with an anger Madison knew well but never stopped fearing. "You go out there buying food for those people who don't want anything, when you should be learning to behave like someone of your position? Do you know what that does to me, Madison? You humiliate me. You make everyone think my daughter is just like them." Madison stopped in the middle of the room, clutching her backpack tightly. Her heart raced, and her father's words hit her like knives. "I just wanted to help, Dad. They were hungry." "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't do anything wrong?" Vincent repeated, laughing bitterly. He took a few steps towards Madison, pointing his finger at her. "You're an embarrassment, Madison. I'm tired of this mania of yours to want to save the world. You have no idea what it means to be part of this family. I should have had a son, someone who understood what power, respect, and status mean, not this disappointment that you are." Madison felt her entire body tremble. Tears began to stream down her face, but she tried to control herself. Her father's words were cruel, but the look of contempt on his face was even worse. "I just wanted to do good, Dad. I just wanted to be useful," she murmured between sobs. "Useful?" Vincent shouted, his eyes wide. "Useful would be you learning to be like me. Stop these foolish ideas of kindness and charity. That's for the weak, Madison. And as long as you keep this poverty mindset, you'll continue to be an embarrassment to me and this family." Without saying another word, Vincent turned and pointed towards the stairs. "You're grounded. Don't leave your room until I say so. And the next time you think about spending my money helping strangers, remember, I have no patience to deal with your stupidity." Madison ran up the stairs, tears now flowing freely down her face. She entered her room and slammed the door shut, falling onto the bed with a loud sob. Vincent's words echoed in her mind, repeating themselves like a broken record. "I should have had a son. You're a disappointment." She clutched the pillow and pressed it against her face, trying to muffle the sounds of her own crying. Deep down, Madison knew her father would never change. He would always be cold, cruel, and insensitive, and nothing she did would be enough to earn his respect or love. Yet, as she sobbed silently, a small flame inside her still resisted. She knew kindness was not a weakness, no matter how much Vincent insisted otherwise. And even in the face of his cruel words, Madison promised herself she would never stop being who she was. That night, as the stars shone outside her window, Madison looked up at the sky and made a silent wish. She didn't know how, but one day she would show her father that being kind was the greatest strength anyone could have. And even if he never understood her, Madison would keep trying to do good, because deep down she knew that was what made her special. The afternoon was hot and quiet at the mansion, but the apparent peace was broken by the sound of the doorbell echoing down the hallway. Madison was in her room looking out the window, still recovering from the harsh words Vincent had said to her earlier, When she heard the sound of the doorbell, she got up curiously and ran to the bedroom door, peeking down the stairs. At the top, she saw Vincent open the door with his usual stern expression. On the other side, an older man, dressed simply and with a weary demeanor, held a pair of worn shoes in one hand. It was Madison's grandfather, Vincent's father, who rarely visited the mansion. He was a shoemaker, a simple man who worked hard to make a living, and Vincent had never made a point of hiding the contempt he felt for him. Still, Madison's grandfather had decided to show up, carrying with him a mixture of humility and hope. "Good afternoon, Vincent. I know it's not common for me to come here, but I needed to talk to you," began the man, his voice calm but laden with a certain hesitation. He looked at Vincent, who crossed his arms and stared at him coldly. "And what brought you here today?" Vincent replied, in a tone of voice that already indicated impatience. His eyes analyzed the man from head to toe, as if his presence were an unbearable nuisance. The grandfather took a deep breath, trying not to be intimidated. "I need help. The shoe business is not doing well and costs have increased. I'm not able to pay some bills and the situation is getting difficult. I thought maybe you could lend me some money. It doesn't need to be much, just enough for me to get organized." Vincent laughed, a dry and humorless laugh, and shook his head. "You must be joking. You came here to ask me for money. You think that's how it works? That I'll just open my wallet and solve your problems just because you're my father?" He looked at the shoe in his grandfather's hand and pointed at it with disdain. "Look at you, a bankrupt shoemaker who can't even support his own shop. And you still have the nerve to come to my house and beg." "It's not begging," his grandfather replied, trying to stay calm. "It's a loan. I'll pay you back, Vincent. I just need a chance to get back on my feet. I'm trying my best." "You're trying?" Vincent interrupted, taking a step forward. His voice grew louder and more aggressive. "If you were really trying, you wouldn't be here. You think I built all this by helping others? No, I did it through hard work and determination. But you're just another failure who wants to live off others. It's pathetic." Madison went down a few steps, watching the scene from afar, her heart aching to see her grandfather treated that way. She knew his hard work, how dedicated he was to the shoe shop and providing for his family. He didn't deserve that, and Madison felt tears well up in her eyes as she heard Vincent's cruel words. The grandfather tried one more time, holding the door before Vincent could close it. "Vincent, please. I'm asking as Elsa's father, as part of your family. This isn't for me, it's for my survival and hers. You know how hard life can be for those without opportunities." Vincent took a step back, looking at the man with even more disdain. "You think you're part of my family? Don't make me laugh. You've been nothing but an embarrassment to me. Don't come back here again. Ever." And with those words, Vincent slammed the door forcefully, leaving his grandfather outside. The sound of the wood echoed through the room, while the old man stood on the porch holding the shoes and staring at the ground with a mix of humiliation and sadness. From the top of the stairs, Madison couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She ran to her room, closing the door behind her and sobbing silently. She knew her grandfather didn't deserve those words, that he was a hard-working and kind man, exactly who she wanted to be. But it seemed Vincent had the power to destroy everything good around him, and Madison didn't know how to fight against it. As Vincent walked back into the living room as if nothing had happened, the grandfather slowly left the porch, shoulders slumped and steps heavy. He didn't say a word, but in his heart, he felt he had lost more than just an opportunity for help. He had lost the chance to connect with a part of his family that seemed more and more distant. And as the mansion's gate closed behind him, the wind carried away the last glimmer of hope he had brought with him. The night was dark and silent, with only the pale moonlight illuminating the empty streets. Madison walked quickly, hugging herself to ward off the cold. Her heart was pounding, and her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. After what had happened that afternoon, she could no longer bear the thought of living under the same roof as Vincent. Every cruel word, every disdainful look, every gesture of humiliation echoed in her mind like an unbearable weight. All she wanted was to leave, to escape that place they called home, but which for her was a prison. Madison didn't know exactly where she was going. Perhaps to her grandmother's house, perhaps somewhere no one knew her. The important thing was to get out of there, to find a space where she could be herself without fear of reprisals. Her hands clutched a backpack with some clothes and a book, the only thing she truly considered her own. The streets were deserted, and the sound of her footsteps echoed, increasing her sense of vulnerability. That's when she heard the footsteps. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but the footsteps grew closer, faster, and she realized she wasn't alone. Madison turned her head and two men emerged from the shadows, their looks making her blood run cold. They were well-dressed, but there was something in their smiles that exuded danger. "Hey, little girl, are you lost?" one of them asked, with a tone of false kindness. He took a few steps toward her, while the other remained still, watching. Madison took a step back, clutching the backpack to her chest. "I'm fine, I'm going home," she replied, trying to stay calm, but her trembling voice betrayed the fear she felt. "Home?" said the second man with a cold smile. "At this hour? Alone? You don't seem very well. Why don't you come with us? We can help you find your way." The first man advanced another step, and Madison felt panic taking over. She looked around, but the street was deserted. There was no one to help her. When she tried to turn and run, one of the men grabbed her arm with force, restraining her. "Hey, take it easy, little girl. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to talk. You know, your father is an important man, isn't he? I think he'll want to see you again. But maybe it's better if we take care of you for a while," the man said, his tone a mix of threat and sarcasm. Madison tried to break free, but the man was much stronger. She began to cry, her heart racing as she struggled uselessly against the grip on her arm. "Let me go, let me go," she shouted, but her voice seemed lost in the empty night. It was then that the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the street. On the other side of the sidewalk, three figures emerged from the shadows. They were the same beggars Madison had helped that morning. They recognized her immediately, and the look of determination on their faces showed they weren't going to ignore what was happening. "Let the girl go now!" shouted the older man in the group. The grizzled shoemaker Madison had fed with sandwiches and juice. He held a piece of wood as if it were an improvised staff, and he walked towards the two men with firm steps. "Who are you?" asked one of the kidnappers, clearly surprised. He still held Madison's arm, but now he looked around, trying to assess the situation. "It doesn't matter who we are," replied the beggar. "What matters is that you're going to let that girl go and leave, now." The second kidnapper took a step forward, laughing softly. "And what are you going to do if we don't let her go? Do you think you can take us on?" At that moment, the other two beggars approached. One of them held a rusty iron bar, while the other picked up stones from the ground, as if ready to use them. They weren't strong or well-equipped, but there was something in their posture that radiated courage. They had nothing to lose, and they were willing to face whatever it took to protect the girl who had shown them kindness when no one else did. "I said, let her go now," repeated the older beggar, advancing with the piece of wood. The kidnapper holding Madison hesitated, realizing the situation was getting out of control. Okay, calm down," he said, releasing Madison's arm and raising his hands. "We don't need any trouble." He took a few steps back, looking at his partner, who seemed equally uncomfortable. "That's right. Get out of here before we lose our patience," said the second beggar, holding the iron bar more firmly. The two men exchanged looks, clearly uncomfortable with the determination of the three beggars. They knew that, even without weapons, those men were willing to fight to the end. Without saying another word, the kidnappers walked away quickly, disappearing into the shadows of the street. Madison stood in the same spot, breathing heavily, still trembling with fear. The older beggar approached her, lowering the piece of wood and placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, girl? Did they hurt you?" Madison shook her head, tears still streaming down her face. I'm okay, thank you so much." "You were good to us this morning," said the older man with a gentle smile. "Now it was our turn to return the favor. But you shouldn't be out alone at this hour. Where are your parents?" Madison lowered her gaze, not knowing what to answer. She knew she couldn't go home now, not after everything that had happened. But at that moment, she also knew she wasn't alone. The people she had helped with a simple gesture had shown that kindness breeds kindness, and that even in the darkest moments, there were still reasons to believe in humanity. The beggars accompanied her to a safe place, making sure she was okay. Madison felt for the first time in a long time that she wasn't completely invisible. As she looked up at the starry sky, she made a promise to herself. She would never let Vincent's words extinguish her light, because it was kindness that made her who she was. Madison was leaning against a pole, trying to catch her breath and calm her still racing heart from the fright. The three beggars remained by her side, attentive and concerned, as if they still feared the men might return. The oldest, the one holding the piece of wood, turned to her, his kind eyes full of worry. "You should go home now, girl. This is not a safe place for you." Before Madison could answer, a black car screeched around the corner and came to an abrupt stop in front of the group. The door flung open, and Vincent got out, huffing, his eyes wide and his face red with anger. He looked furious, every step charged with tension as he walked towards his daughter and the beggars. "What's going on here?" Vincent shouted, his voice echoing through the silent street. He looked at the three men with disdain, his fists clenched and ready to attack. "What are you doing with my daughter? Did you want to rob her? Is that it? Or were you trying to kidnap her?" The beggars exchanged glances, perplexed by the accusation. The oldest took a step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Sir, it's not like that. Your daughter was in danger, and we—" "Shut up!" Vincent roared, interrupting the man before he could finish the sentence. "I don't want to hear a word from you. I know very well what types like you do. You live on the streets, waiting for an opportunity to rob decent people. Don't you dare lie to me." Madison tried to intervene, tears in her eyes. "Dad, it's not true. They helped me. I was in danger and they—" "Shut up, Madison," Vincent shouted, turning to her. His face was contorted with rage, and his eyes seemed to blaze with a mixture of frustration and shame. "You don't understand anything. I trusted you to stay home, and you go out in the middle of the night to mingle with this kind of people? Do you have any idea how that makes me look? How do you think that affects our name?" The beggars observed the scene in silence, clearly uncomfortable, but without the courage to leave Madison alone in that situation. The youngest of the group tried again to intervene, with a calm but firm voice. "Sir, we are not trying to steal your daughter. She helped us earlier, and when we saw she was in danger, we did what anyone should do. We just wanted to protect her." Vincent gave a bitter laugh, advancing towards him with heavy steps. "Protect her? Don't make me laugh. People like you don't protect anyone. You are parasites, living at the expense of others. And now, you want to play the heroes? Get out of here, all of you, before I call the police." He pushed the younger beggar hard, almost knocking him down, while the other two slowly backed away, not knowing what to do. The eldest still tried to explain, but Vincent was not willing to listen. "Get out of here," he shouted again, pointing to the end of the street, as if he were a judge handing down a sentence. "And if I see any of you near my daughter again, you'll be sorry." Madison started crying, desperate at the way Vincent was treating the people who had saved her life. "Dad, please stop. They haven't done anything wrong. You don't understand." I told you to be quiet," Vincent shouted, grabbing his daughter's arm and pulling her toward the car. He shoved her into the back seat, slamming the door before returning to the driver's seat. With one last furious look at the beggars, he got into the car and accelerated, leaving the sound of burning tires echoing down the street. In the back seat, Madison sobbed, her face buried in her hands. She tried to explain again, but Vincent wouldn't listen. "I don't want to hear anything else, Madison. You disobeyed my orders, left the house in the middle of the night, and even had the audacity to mingle with those people. Do you have any idea what that means? The danger you put yourself and our family in?" "I was trying to run away, Dad," Madison shouted back, the words coming out broken by sobs. "I can't stand living like this anymore, with you treating me like I'm trash. They were the only ones who helped me, while you only know how to humiliate me." Vincent turned around for a moment, his face still loaded with anger. "I treat you as you deserve, Madison. You need to learn to respect your position. This kindness of yours will only lead you to ruin, and the last thing I'll allow is for you to destroy everything I've built." When they arrived at the mansion, Vincent opened the car door and pulled Madison out. He dragged her to the entrance, ignoring her protests and tears. "From now on, you are forbidden from leaving the house. I don't want to hear about you helping anyone or trying to run away again. If you do it again, the consequences will be even worse." Madison ran up the stairs, letting the tears fall freely. She entered the room and locked the door, falling onto the bed with her body trembling with emotion. She didn't know how much longer she could endure that. But one thing was certain. Even in the face of her father's cruelty, she would never forget the kindness of the beggars who risked their lives for her. As she looked at the ceiling, she made a silent promise. One day she would show her father what it really meant to be strong. And strength, Madison knew, came from kindness. The next morning, Madison walked to school with slow steps, still feeling the weight of what had happened the night before. Her backpack seemed heavier than usual, but not because of books or notebooks, but because of Vincent's harsh words that still echoed in her mind. She looked up at the sky where the sun was shining shyly between the clouds, as if hesitant to bring warmth to that cold day. As she turned the corner of the main square, Madison spotted a familiar figure. It was her grandfather, sitting on a small makeshift bench next to his old shoemaker's stall. His demeanor was dejected, and his calloused hands carefully held a piece of leather. He looked around as if he was waiting for some customer, but the square was almost empty, with only a few people rushing by without even noticing his presence. Madison stopped for a moment, watching her grandfather. He looked so tired, so fragile, but there was something in his posture that still showed dignity. She felt a wave of affection and compassion grow inside her, and without a second thought, she ran to him, dropping her backpack on the ground before hugging him tightly. "Grandpa!" Madison exclaimed, with a smile that lit up her pale face. The shoemaker raised his eyes, surprised, but his expression quickly softened as he recognized his granddaughter. He opened his arms to welcome her, returning the embrace with a tenderness that overflowed in his gestures. "Madison, my girl, what are you doing here so early? Shouldn't you be going to school?" "I'm going, but I couldn't pass by without talking to you," Madison replied, releasing him and sitting on the bench beside him. She looked at the stall and the few worn shoes that were there, waiting for repair. "How are things, Grandpa? Is everything okay?" The grandfather sighed, running his hand through his gray hair and looking at the ground. "Ah, my dear, things have been difficult. Few people get their shoes repaired these days. They prefer to buy new ones, you know. But I keep going, trying, because I don't know how to do anything else. This bench is my life." Madison felt her heart tighten. She knew her grandfather's hard work. She knew how dedicated he was to maintain his dignity even in the face of difficulties. And this made Vincent's attitude seem even more cruel. Without much thought, Madison looked at her own shoes, which were a little worn at the tips, and smiled with determination. "Grandpa, I have an idea. How about you repair my shoes? They need an adjustment, and I would love for you to take care of it," she said, extending her feet so he could see. The grandfather looked at his granddaughter's shoes and then at her face, with an expression that mixed surprise and emotion. "You want me to repair your shoes? But my girl, they seem fine to me. You don't need to spend money on that." "It's not about needing, Grandpa," Madison replied with a gentle smile. "I want you to do it, and I'll pay later, I promise. I just don't have money now because my father doesn't give me anything anymore. But as soon as I get some, I'll come back to settle it with you." The grandfather laughed softly, but his eyes were shining with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He knew that Madison was trying to help him in some way, and that meant more to him than any money. "You're an angel, Madison. You don't need to pay anything. Repairing my granddaughter's shoes is a gift for me, not a job. Let me see those shoes here." Carefully, the grandfather took the shoes off Madison's feet and began to examine them. His calloused hands moved with precision, as if each movement was a dance rehearsed over years of practice. He grabbed some tools from the stall and began to work, while Madison watched him with admiration. "Grandpa, you're so talented," she said after a few minutes of silence. "I've never seen anyone work like this. It's like art." The shoemaker smiled but didn't look up. "Art or not, it's what I know how to do, my dear. And it's what makes me get up every day. Even when things are difficult, I remember that I can still use my hands to do something useful. That gives me strength." His words touched Madison deeply. She thought of Vincent, who had never valued her grandfather's work, and felt a mixture of sadness and resentment. But at that moment, she decided that the important thing was to make the most of the time she had with him, to learn from his wisdom and his silent strength. When her grandfather finished, Madison's shoes looked brand new. He handed them to her with a satisfied smile, as she quickly put them on and took a few steps to test them. "They're perfect, Grandpa. You're the best shoemaker in the world." "You're a suspicious one to talk, girl," he joked, laughing. "But I'm glad you liked them," Madison gave her grandfather another tight hug before grabbing her backpack and heading to school. "I'll be back, Grandpa, and next time I'll bring you more customers. I promise." The shoemaker waved to her, watching as she walked away. He felt his heart warm with his granddaughter's gesture. Despite all the difficulties, that little moment of connection was enough to remind him that there were still good things in life. As he returned to his workbench with a discreet smile on his face, he thought about how different Madison was from Vincent, and how her kindness was a light amidst the darkness that often surrounded the family. And Madison, walking to school, felt lighter than she had in previous days. She knew she couldn't change Vincent's behavior, but she was determined never to let him extinguish the kindness she had learned from her grandfather. After all, being kind wasn't just a choice, but the essence of who she was. Madison walked along the sidewalk toward school, trying to leave behind the weight of recent events. Her backpack felt lighter that day, perhaps because for the first time in a long time she felt a little stronger. The encounter with her grandfather had warmed her heart, and she repeated to herself the promise never to let her father extinguish her kindness. When she turned the corner near the school, something caught her attention. Standing in front of a row of upscale restaurants was one of the beggars who had helped her the night before. He seemed out of place in that luxurious setting, but there was something about his posture that radiated dignity, even in the face of the looks of disdain from passers-by. Madison hesitated for a moment, but the impulse to speak to him was stronger. She quickly crossed the street, dodging hurried pedestrians, and stopped beside him. "Hi, do you remember me?" she asked with a shy smile. The man looked up, surprised, but immediately smiled when he recognized her. "Of course I remember you, girl. You never forget a good person like you. What are you doing here so early?" Madison lowered her gaze, a little embarrassed. The memories of Vincent's behavior the previous night still weighed heavily on her heart. "I wanted to apologize for my dad. He was horrible to you guys last night, and you were just trying to help me. I'm sorry for what he said and the way he treated you. It wasn't fair." The man watched the girl for a moment, and then shook his head with a gentle smile. "You don't need to apologize, girl. I understand. Sometimes people carry things inside them that make them hard, but that has nothing to do with you. You're different. You have something special, something the world needs." Madison looked up, surprised by his words. "But he's my father. What he does reflects on me, and I feel so powerless. I wish he could see things differently. I wish he understood that helping others isn't wrong." The man sighed, leaning slightly against the wall behind him. "You know, girl, kindness is a powerful thing. Not everybody understands that, but those who feel it, who receive it, never forget. Don't let his words discourage you. You've already done more for me and my friends than a lot of rich and powerful people out there. That alone shows the kind of person you are." Madison felt her eyes well up with tears, but she held them back. "I just wanted to do the right thing. It's so hard when it seems like no one around me understands." The man placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, the smile still present on his tired but warm face. "Look, girl, the world needs people like you. People who care, who see those in the shadows. Don't let anyone extinguish that. Keep being who you are, because that kindness is the most beautiful thing you can offer the world." Madison felt a lump in her throat, but also a wave of warmth in her chest. His words were simple but loaded with meaning. She smiled at him, her heart feeling lighter. "Thank you for everything. I promise I'll try to be better every day." "You're already wonderful, girl. You don't need to try to be anything other than yourself," he replied with a light laugh. "Now go to school, go learn new things, grow, and keep spreading that light you have." Madison nodded with a sincere smile, and then waved goodbye before continuing on her way. As she walked, his words echoed in her mind, filling her with a renewed determination. She knew she would still face challenges, especially with Vincent, but at that moment she felt she had found a strength within herself that no one could take away. Kindness was her weapon, her essence, and she was willing to fight to keep it, no matter how hard the world tried to extinguish it. And behind her, the man watched as the girl walked away, a discreet smile on his face. He knew her future was bright, because even at such a young age, Madison was already a light in the darkness. The path back home seemed shorter that day, but no less heavy. Madison walked with slow steps, still digesting the words of the man she had met in the morning. They strengthened her, but the weight of knowing she would return to the environment controlled by Vincent made her hesitate. Upon arriving at the mansion, she noticed an unusual movement at the entrance. A young woman dressed simply and with a shy expression was at the door carrying a small suitcase. She was the new maid, who had arrived to replace the previous one, fired by Vincent for reasons Madison never fully understood. As soon as Madison entered, she found Vincent in the main lobby. He was standing in front of the woman, arms crossed and an expression of disdain on his face. His voice echoed through the hallway, laden with sarcasm and arrogance. "Let me make it clear. Here you work for me, and I expect absolute obedience. No mistakes, no excuses, and definitely no trying to be friends with my family. You do what I say and nothing more." Madison stopped in the middle of the hallway, observing the scene with a heavy heart. The maid seemed uncomfortable, looking down at the floor as Vincent spoke. There was something about her demeanor that reminded Madison of the people she had helped in the square. It was the same look of someone who had endured more than their fair share in life, but was still trying to move forward. "Ah, Madison, good that you arrived," said Vincent, suddenly turning and looking at his daughter. The tone of his voice made Madison shudder. There was something in his eyes that she recognized. He was about to make her a part of his cruel game. "Come here. I want you to tell the new maid what happens to people who don't do their work properly in this house." Madison stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. I don't know what to say, Dad," she stammered, taking a step back. Vincent snorted impatiently and approached her with firm steps. "You don't know what to say? It's simple, Madison. Tell her that if she makes a mistake, she'll be treated as she deserves. Tell her there is no room for weakness or incompetence in this house. Come on now." The maid raised her gaze for a moment, meeting Madison's eyes. There was something in that exchange of glances that implored for compassion, for a gesture of humanity. But Vincent's imposing presence loomed over Madison like a shadow, and she felt her chest tighten. She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her father that he was wrong, but the memory of nights of punishment and his cruel words paralyzed every muscle in her body. I can't do this, Dad," Madison said, her voice choked. Tears began to fill her eyes, but she tried to hold them back. "She hasn't done anything wrong. Why are you doing this?" Vincent leaned in, bringing his face closer to hers, and his expression grew even darker. "You think you can defy me, Madison? Is that it? You want me to teach you a lesson too? Do as I say now." Madison felt her heart racing. She looked at the maid again, and tears began to stream down her face. The girl took a deep breath, trying to find some courage within herself, but the fear of facing Vincent was greater than she could bear at that moment. With a trembling voice, Madison finally said, "Please, do everything right. Don't make a mistake, or else it will be bad." Each word came out like a knife cutting her own soul. The tears were now flowing freely, and Madison could barely finish the sentence. The maid looked at her with a mixture of pity and understanding, but said nothing. She knew that child was as trapped as she was. Vincent gave a satisfied smile and stepped back, watching the scene as if he were the conductor of a play he himself had created. "You see how it's not so difficult. Sometimes we need to be tough to ensure things work as they should. Now go to your room, Madison." Without saying a word, Madison ran up the stairs, her face wet with tears. She entered the room and locked the door, throwing herself on the bed as her body trembled. She hated what she had done, hated what her father forced her to be, but at that moment she felt more powerless than ever. As she cried silently, a promise began to take shape in her mind. One day, she would find a way to be strong enough to never give in to fear again. Because even though she was scared, she knew true strength lay in kindness, and that was the only thing Vincent could never completely destroy within her. The day seemed to drag on like never before. Madison had been locked in her room since morning, trying to ignore the screams echoing through the house. Vincent was having one of his worst days, shouting orders at the new maid with an intensity that made the walls tremble. Madison heard the sound of objects breaking, perhaps a glass or plate thrown to the floor, and each noise made her heart ache even more. She knew the maid was bearing the brunt of her father's uncontrollable temper, and although she wanted to do something, fear kept her motionless. As evening began to fall, the sound of voices coming from the living room caught her attention. She hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and the weight on her conscience propelled her downstairs slowly, trying not to make noise. Arriving in the living room, she saw Vincent standing next to a man she immediately recognized. It was Levi, the beggar she had encountered in front of the fancy restaurant that morning. He was standing with his hands crossed in front of his body, in a humble posture. But there was something in his expression that conveyed dignity, despite the oppressive environment. "So, Levi, is that it?" said Vincent, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he looked the man up and down. "You're the new gardener. This is the kind of person I managed to hire. This is the type that will now work in my house." Madison stood frozen at the entrance to the living room, unable to move. Her heart raced when she realized her father knew exactly who Levi was. It was no coincidence that he was there. Vincent knew the man had helped Madison, and now he was using it as an opportunity to exercise his cruelty. Levi, however, remained calm. He looked at Vincent with serenity, ignoring the provocative tone. "Yes, sir. My name is Levi. I came to work. I just need an opportunity, and I promise I'll do my best." Vincent let out a bitter laugh, crossing his arms as he looked at Levi as if he were a joke. "Your best? And what exactly is your best, huh? Sleeping on the street and begging? Is that what you call qualifications? You think you can take care of my gardens with that defeated posture of yours?" Madison felt the tears begin to form in her eyes. She wanted to scream, wanted to beg her father to stop, but fear paralyzed her. She knew how cruel Vincent could be, and the last thing she wanted was to make the situation worse for Levi. Still, her chest ached to see the man who had helped her being treated that way. Levi, however, didn't lose his composure. He took a deep breath before answering, his voice firm but calm. "Sir, I just need a chance. I may not have much to offer, but I'm a hard worker and an honest man. I'm not here for charity. I'm here to earn my living with dignity." Vincent narrowed his eyes, taking a few steps toward Levi. "Dignity?" he repeated, almost spitting out the word. "Someone like you doesn't know what dignity is. You people live off the kindness of others, begging while people like me work hard to sustain all of this." He waved around, as if to emphasize the grandeur of the mansion. "I should have sent you away the moment you set foot here." Madison couldn't contain herself any longer. With tear-filled eyes and a racing heart, she took a step forward, catching Vincent's attention. "Dad, please stop. He hasn't done anything wrong. He just wants to work. Why do you have to be so cruel?" Vincent turned to his daughter, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and contempt. "Cruel? I'm cruel, Madison. I'm trying to teach you not to be naive. This man doesn't deserve your pity. He's a failure, and failures have no place in our lives." Madison felt her entire body tremble, but she didn't look away from her father. For the first time, she tried to stand up to him, even though her voice came out shaky. "You're wrong, Dad. He's a good person. He helped me when no one else would. You should at least give him a chance instead of treating him like this." Vincent let out a bitter laugh and shook his head. "You're as pathetic as he is. Looks like you've learned well from your street friends. Maybe I should let you sleep out there with them, to see what real life is like." Levi intervened, taking a step forward, but maintaining his calm. "Sir, I don't want to cause any trouble. If my presence offends you so much, I can leave. I don't want to be a burden on anyone." "Of course you're leaving," Vincent responded with a cold smile. "But only after you learn that people like you only exist because people like me allow it. Now get out of my sight before I lose what little patience I have left." Madison looked at Levi, her eyes filled with tears and her heart broken. She wanted to say something, do something, but she felt powerless in the face of Vincent's fury. Levi, on the other hand, smiled at her slightly, as if he wanted to convey a message of strength. "Don't worry, girl," he said before leaving the room. "Keep being who you are. That's more important than anything else." When Levi left, Madison stood still, the tears silently streaming down her face. Vincent looked at her with disdain and turned away, leaving the room without saying another word. The girl sank onto the couch, hugging her knees, feeling more lost than ever. But amidst the sadness, Levi's words echoed in her mind, a reminder that kindness was her greatest strength, and she would never let anyone destroy that. The following morning arrived with a clear sky and the sound of birdsong echoing through the mansion's garden. Madison, still feeling the weight of the previous day's events, descended the stairs with hesitant steps, unsure of what to expect. When she looked out the living room window, She saw Levi in the garden, pruning the flowers with firm, decisive movements. Something about the scene made her stop and observe, intrigued. The flowers were her father's pride, a symbol of the luxury and perfection he demanded in his life. Yet Levi cut them without hesitation, as if he had a greater purpose behind each movement. Madison opened the door and slowly walked up to him, holding her coat against the cold morning wind. As she approached, Levi looked up and smiled slightly, setting the pruning shears aside. He looked exhausted, but there was something in his expression that conveyed tranquility. "Good morning, Levi," said Madison with a shy smile. "What are you doing? These flowers? My father really likes them. He'll be angry if he finds out." Levi wiped his hands on his tattered pants and looked at Madison with a calm but serious expression. "I know he'll be angry, girl, but sometimes for something to grow better, you need to prune. Remove what's old, what no longer serves its purpose. It's a way to make room for the new, for what has real strength." Madison frowned, trying to understand the meaning behind his words. She looked at the pruned branches on the ground, and then at the flowers that remained even more vibrant in the sunlight. "Are you talking about the flowers, or something else?" Levi let out a low laugh, but he didn't answer directly. He picked up the shears again and continued his work, as if he wanted to let Madison find her own answer. "Madison, you're a special girl. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Sometimes the world can be cruel, but your kindness is like these flowers. Even if someone tries to uproot it, it always grows back." Levi's words touched something deep within Madison, and she felt tears begin to form in her eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to contain her emotion, and then said, "Levi, I want to do something for you. You've done so much for me, and I don't even know how to thank you." Levi stopped pruning for a moment and looked at her with a gentle smile. "You've already done more than you can imagine, girl. Your gesture in that square, that gave me strength when I had none left. Just by existing, you are already making a difference." Madison felt her heart tighten. She knew Levi was being sincere, but still wanted to reciprocate somehow. "Please, let me prepare something for you. A lunch, a coffee, anything. You can't leave without accepting at least that." Levi shook his head, still smiling, but with a quiet determination in his eyes. "I appreciate it, Madison, but I can't accept. It's not that I don't want to, but there are things we need to do alone, and I still have a long way to go." Madison tried to insist, but Levi had already put away the shears and was walking towards the gate. He stopped for a moment, turned to her and said, his voice full of tenderness, "Take good care of these flowers, Madison, and take care of yourself. You are much stronger than you think." Before she could answer, Levi crossed the gate and disappeared down the street, leaving Madison alone in the garden. She looked at the pruned flowers and felt a mixture of sadness and hope. Levi's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time she began to believe that perhaps he was right. Even if the world tried to erase her, she could always bloom again. Back at the mansion, Madison entered the living room and looked at the opulent surroundings that now seemed colder and emptier than ever. She knew she would still face challenges, but Levi's words and gestures had given her something Vincent had never been able to, a sense of worth and purpose. At that moment, Madison made a promise to herself. She would not let her father or anyone else take away from her what was most precious: her kindness, her strength, her ability to transform the world around her, even if it was one small piece at a time. The quiet silence of the garden was interrupted by the sound of brisk, hurried footsteps. Madison turned quickly and saw Vincent coming from the direction of the mansion, his face laden with anger. His impeccable suit and well-adjusted tie contrasted with the storm that was reflected in his eyes. He stopped beside Madison, looking at the freshly pruned flowers, and his expression became even darker. "So this is it," said Vincent, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "He cuts my flowers and you just stand there watching? Do you think this is a joke, Madison? That you can let anyone in and do whatever they want in my garden?" Madison swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Dad, he was just trying to help. He said the flowers needed to be pruned to grow better. He did it for me." "For you?" Vincent interrupted with a bitter laugh that echoed through the garden. "For you, Madison. That man is a nobody. He has no right to touch anything that belongs to me, let alone this garden. This is mine, all of this. And you think you can bring someone off the street to do whatever they want? You're completely out of your mind." Madison felt tears start to well up, but she remained firm. "Dad, please listen. He didn't do anything wrong. He just wanted to help. He was trying to fix things, make them better." "Improve?" Vincent shouted, his eyes flashing with anger. He took a step forward, ignoring his daughter's presence, and grabbed the pruning shears that Levi had left. "I'll show you what I do with anyone who thinks they can mess with my things." Before Madison could react, Vincent began tearing out the remaining flowers, cutting the branches with rough and uncontrolled movements. The colorful petals fell to the ground like tears, and the sound of the breaking branches seemed like an echo of his fury. He wouldn't stop, each movement more violent than the one before, until the once vibrant garden became a desolate landscape of shattered branches and scattered leaves. "Dad, stop!" Madison shouted, trying to hold him back, but he ignored her completely. His eyes were fixed on what he was doing, as if destroying those flowers was the only way to channel his frustration. When he finally stopped, panting, the garden was unrecognizable. Only the cut stems remained, and the floor was covered with crushed petals. Vincent looked around, satisfied with his work, and threw the shears to the ground. "This is what happens when someone disrespects my rules. Let this be a lesson to you, Madison. Don't bring anyone else to this place." Madison stood still, looking at the destroyed garden, tears silently streaming down her face. She felt a deep pain, as if the cut flowers were a part of herself. Each petal on the ground seemed like a piece of her own hope that her father crushed once again with his cruelty. "Why, Dad?" Madison whispered, her voice trembling. "Why do you always have to destroy everything? It's not just a garden. You're destroying something much bigger than that." Vincent turned to her, without a shred of remorse in his eyes. "I destroy what needs to be destroyed, Madison. And if you don't learn that now, you'll spend your life being weak, like that beggar you insist on defending. The world has no place for weakness. If you don't understand that, you'll never survive." Without saying another word, Vincent left the garden, leaving Madison alone amidst the chaos he had caused. She fell to her knees on the ground, holding some petals with her small hands and feeling the sweet scent that still lingered. Levi's words echoed in her mind. "Sometimes, for something to grow better, you need to prune, take away what no longer serves." Madison looked up at the sky, where the sun was shyly peeking through the clouds, and made a silent promise. No matter what Vincent did, she wouldn't let him destroy the good inside her. Even if he ripped out every flower, she knew she could plant again, and this time no one would be able to stop them from growing. Vincent remained silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on his daughter's face. Then he let out a dry laugh and shook his head. "Madison, you're too young to understand what strength is. When you grow up, maybe you'll see things as I see them. Now stop crying over someone who is no longer here. It won't change anything." Unable to bear her father's words any longer, Madison ran out to the garden, where the flowers had not yet recovered from Vincent's attack. She sat down on the damp ground, hugging her knees, and let the tears flow freely. The weight of the loss seemed unbearable, but more painful than that was Vincent's coldness. She didn't understand how someone could be so indifferent to pain, so incapable of showing love or compassion. As the wind blew around her, Madison looked up at the grey sky and made a promise to her grandfather. "I will honor you, Grandpa. I will remember everything you taught me, and I will try to be like you. One day I will make the world see that being kind is the greatest strength that exists." Madison stayed there for hours, until the sun began to set. The emptiness inside her was still great, but the memory of her grandfather gave her strength. She knew she would need to be strong, not as Vincent understood strength, but as her grandfather had shown her, by being kind, resilient, and true to who she really was. Madison walked slowly through the entrance of the small church, where her grandfather's wake was taking place. The space was simple, with wooden benches lined up and candles flickering on the altar, but the atmosphere was charged with emotion. Madison held a white rose in her small hands and trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from a pain that seemed greater than she could bear. The muffled sound of sobs all around only made the moment more difficult. Friends and neighbors of her grandfather had gathered to pay their respects, all with expressions of respect and sadness, but none of them could fill the void Madison felt. She paused in front of the coffin, taking a deep breath before looking at the serene face of the man who had meant so much to her. With tears streaming down her face, Madison stepped closer, placing the rose on the coffin. Her voice came out trembling, almost inaudible but laden with sincerity. "Grandpa, I'm going to miss you so much. Thank you for everything, for every word of encouragement, for every smile. You were always my safe haven, and I promise I'll never forget everything you taught me." She pressed her hands to her chest, trying to hold back the tears that insisted on falling. Around her, people respected the girl's moment of mourning, but Madison felt isolated in her grief. It wasn't just the loss of her grandfather, but also the knowledge that Vincent hadn't cared enough to be there. He hadn't even recognized his father's value in life, and now it seemed that his contempt continued even in death. When she returned home that afternoon, the mansion was strangely silent. The sun was shining, but the light seemed unable to reach the cold, empty interior of the place. Madison entered hesitantly, still holding the small purse she had brought to the wake. As she crossed the lobby, she heard voices coming from the living room and felt a chill. She followed the sound, and upon entering, she found Vincent standing next to a boy she had never seen before. The boy, apparently the same age as her, wore expensive clothes and had a confident smile on his face. Madison stood frozen in the doorway, confused and with her heart racing, as Vincent watched her with that cold look she knew so well. "Madison, you finally arrived," said Vincent, his voice laden with indifference. He indicated the boy beside him with a casual gesture. "This is Wesley. He is your new brother. In fact, he is everything you've never been. Intelligent, obedient, and someone who can carry the name of this family with pride." Madison felt her heart racing, unable to process the words. The revelation seemed impossible, like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. "Dad, what are you saying? Who is he? Why are you talking like this?" Vincent crossed his arms and took a step forward, approaching Madison. "I'm saying that you're no longer needed in this house, Madison. You only cause problems, always disobeying, always defying my orders. Your kindness is a weakness, something that will never get you anywhere. Wesley, on the other hand, is the son I should have had. And now that he's here, there's no place for you anymore." The words were like knives, cutting Madison's heart with each sentence. She shook her head, feeling tears fill her eyes. "Dad, you can't do this. I'm your daughter. I tried to be good. I tried to do what was right. Why are you treating me like this? I didn't do anything to deserve this." Vincent let out a bitter laugh, the sound reverberating through the room like a cruel echo that pierced Madison's heart. He shook his head with a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good?" he repeated, carrying the word with contempt. "Your kindness has only brought me shame, Madison. Ever since you started with this obsession of helping everyone, you've only made me look foolish. You walk the streets, mingling with people who have nothing to offer, as if you were one of them. You don't understand the weight of carrying this surname, what it means to be above others." He took a step forward, leaning slightly to look Madison in the eyes, as if he wanted to crush her with his presence. "You are a disappointment. And now I've made my decision. Pack your things and get out of this house. You are no longer part of this family." Each word from Vincent hit Madison like a blow, leaving her breathless. She felt her stomach churn and the ground seemed unstable beneath her feet. For a moment, she thought he might be exaggerating, that it was just another of his cruel provocations. But when her eyes met Wesley's standing beside Vincent, she realized it was no joke. The boy kept a small but confident smile, as if he already knew he had taken her place. Madison tried to find some explanation, but the emptiness in Vincent's gaze was definitive. It was as if she had been replaced without any consideration, discarded as something that no longer had value. Unable to respond, Madison turned and ran up the stairs, her eyes watery and her breath labored. Each step seemed higher, as if the weight of her father's words increased with every stride. When she reached her room, she slammed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. Tears streamed freely down her face as she looked around at the space that had been her refuge for years. Now the room seemed strange, empty, as if it no longer belonged to her. With trembling hands, she began to gather some clothes and belongings, tossing them haphazardly into a small backpack. Each piece of clothing, each object she put in the backpack, seemed like a piece of her life being torn away. When she grabbed a photo of her grandfather that she kept in the drawer, Madison paused for a moment, clutching it to her chest. The tears returned with greater intensity as she recalled his gentle words, the moments when he made her believe that she was special, that her kindness was a strength and not a weakness. Now, those memories seemed so distant, almost unreachable. She took a deep breath, wiping her face with her hands, and carefully placed the photo inside the backpack. She looked around the room one more time, at the bed where she used to dream, at the books that brought her comfort, and felt a lump in her throat. This space, which once meant safety, was now just a reminder of how unwanted she was there. With the backpack on her back, Madison slowly descended the stairs, each step accompanied by the sound of her racing heart. When she reached the foyer, she found Vincent standing near the door, as if waiting to ensure she really left. Wesley remained by his side, watching her with an indifferent expression, as if her presence there was irrelevant. Madison stopped for a moment, looking at her father with tear-filled eyes, but her voice came out trembling, charged with determination. "You're making a mistake, Daddy. One day, you'll realize that being cruel is not being strong. And when that happens, I hope there's still something inside you worth saving." Vincent didn't respond. He just turned his face away, as if Madison's words didn't deserve consideration. That indifference was even more painful than any shout or insult he could have said. Madison felt the weight of rejection crush her, but she knew she couldn't show weakness. Without waiting for anything else, she opened the door and left, feeling the cold afternoon air touch her face. Each step along the sidewalk seemed heavier, as if she were carrying the weight of all her father's scorn on her back. The wind cut her cheeks, but the physical pain was minimal compared to the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Madison gripped the straps of her backpack, trying to stay strong. In her mind, her grandfather's words echoed, as a reminder of who she really was. "No matter what happens, your kindness is your greatest strength. Never let anyone take it away from you." As she walked along the deserted streets, Madison looked up at the sky where the sun was beginning to set in a spectacle of orange and pink. Under that sky, she made a silent promise. She would find a new place, a new home where she could be who she was, without fear or shame. Vincent might have kicked her out of the house, but he would never be able to tear out what her grandfather had planted in her. Madison knew the world could be cruel, but she also knew that her kindness was a light in the darkness. And even though everything seemed lost, she was determined to find a way to flourish again. The first few days away from the mansion were difficult, but Madison still carried a thread of hope. She slept in a corner of the main square, trying not to draw attention while planning what to do. However, when the money she had saved ran out, reality began to become unbearable. Hunger was a constant pain, a feeling that went beyond an empty stomach. It was a weakness that made her legs tremble, her thoughts become clouded, and the world seem even crueler. One morning, with the sun burning on her already dirty and marked skin, Madison gathered courage to approach a woman walking along the sidewalk. She was an acquaintance of high society, someone who attended the same events as Vincent. Madison remembered seeing her several times at the mansion, always smiling and praising the immaculate gardens. Now the woman looked at Madison as if she were seeing something repulsive. "Excuse me, ma'am. I just need a little food, please," Madison said, her voice low and trembling. Her hand extended timidly as if asking was a crime. The woman stopped for a moment, adjusting her elegant hat and looking Madison up and down. Her gaze overflowed with contempt, as if the girl were an insignificant insect. "You're Vincent's daughter, aren't you? Oh, how the world turns. From princess to this." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Your father must be so ashamed of you." Madison felt her face burn, but hunger forced her to swallow her pride. "Please, Mum, I just want to eat. I have no one left." The woman laughed again, louder this time, drawing the attention of other people passing by on the street. "You, millionaire's daughter, begging. How pathetic. Maybe now you'll understand what the real world is like, dear. It's not made of pretty gardens and expensive dresses. Oh, but of course you were never strong enough to deal with that, were you?" Without waiting for a response, the woman turned and left, leaving Madison standing on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her dirty face. Some people who witnessed the scene laughed or just looked away, as if ignoring her existence was easier than offering help. Madison felt her stomach churn, but she knew she had no choice but to keep going. Later, she approached a bakery, where the smell of fresh breads and cakes made her salivate. The shopkeeper looked at her with suspicion as she tried to explain herself. "Please, just a piece of bread. I can work. Do something to pay for it." The man, arms crossed, looked at Madison with a stern expression. "Work. You look like you can't even lift a bag of flour, girl. We don't have charity here. Go somewhere else." Before she could insist, he pointed to the door. "And don't stay here bothering the customers." Madison left the bakery with a heavy heart and an empty stomach. Her mind was clouded, but the humiliation seemed to hurt more than the hunger. She sat down in a corner of the sidewalk, hugging her knees as silent tears rolled down her face. Madison tried to remember her grandfather's words, her promise to never give up. But at that moment, everything seemed impossible. As she sat there, a group of young people passed by, laughing loudly and carrying bags from expensive stores. One of them recognized Madison and stopped. "Hey, isn't that Vincent's daughter? What are you doing here, all dirty like that?" "Trying to become a professional beggar." The laughter echoed around, while another young man added, "I think your father finally got rid of you. He always said you were a disgrace, and look, he was right." Madison remained silent, their words piercing every piece of her self-esteem. She had no strength to respond or even get up. All she could do was endure, hoping the day would end, even though she didn't know if the next one would be any better. Madison knew the world wouldn't be kind, but the cruelty of people seemed unbearable. The hunger, humiliation, and loneliness were more than she had ever imagined. Yet somewhere deep inside, there was a spark that refused to be extinguished. No matter how hard the world tried to crush her, she wouldn't let it steal who she was. After all, her kindness was all she had left, and she was determined to keep it, even if only for herself. The days grew long and cruel for Madison. Hunger was a constant pain that never left her. Every morning she woke up in some corner, whether in the square or under a canopy, her stomach growling and her body weakened. Her knees were bruised, her clothes torn and dirty, and her face, which once shone with a child's innocence, now carried the shadow of exhaustion and despair. Madison wandered the streets aimlessly, trying to find something, anything to eat, but the world seemed to have decided to turn its back on her. On one of the most difficult days, Madison approached a small cafe where well-dressed customers chatted animatedly at the outdoor tables. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pastries made her stomach churn with need. She timidly approached an elegant woman sipping a cappuccino while typing on a golden laptop. Madison took a deep breath, swallowing what little pride she had left, and murmured, "Excuse me, ma'am, I just need something to eat. Please, just a piece of bread." The woman looked up, adjusting her expensive framed glasses, and frowned as if Madison were an insect she could barely tolerate. "Eat? That's what you get for lacking discipline, isn't it? Kids like you only know how to ask, but you don't do anything to change your own situation. I have nothing for you. Leave before you ruin my appetite." With that, the woman turned away, focusing back on her computer as if Madison didn't exist. Madison felt her cheeks burn as the other customers around started whispering and laughing. A man at a nearby table looked her up and down and said loudly, "It's amazing how these kids know how to pretend. Her father was probably a millionaire, and now she wants us to pay for her family's incompetence." The laughter grew louder, and Madison felt the tears well up again, but she didn't let them fall. She ran off, her heart pounding and her stomach growling, until she found an alley where she could hide. Sitting on the cold ground, Madison hugged her knees and cried softly. Her throat was dry, her stomach ached as if it were being twisted, and her mind could barely focus. Madison remembered the times when her grandfather used to hug her, telling her she was strong, but now that seemed like a distant lie. How could anyone be strong when even surviving seemed impossible? The next day, the hunger became unbearable. Madison gathered what little courage she had left and entered a convenience store, where the air conditioning made her skin prickle. She slowly walked to a shelf of packaged breads, smelling the sweet aroma that seemed to mock her. Without thinking, she grabbed a loaf and started eating it right there, her hands trembling. That's when she heard a loud voice behind her. "Hey girl, what do you think you're doing?" the clerk shouted, approaching with firm steps. Madison froze, the piece of bread still in her hands. The man grabbed her by the arm and pulled her to the front of the store, where other customers started to look. "You think you can steal here? Think again. I'm not letting this slide." I was just hungry," she tried to explain, her voice almost inaudible, but the clerk didn't want to hear it. He pushed her out of the store where some people had gathered, curious. That's what you get for being too spoiled. Now you're out here stealing to survive. I bet you don't even know what real work is, said a woman outside, laughing with disdain. Someone else took a picture of her with their phone, while a group of young people guffawed. Madison felt as if the world was crushing her. She wanted to disappear, to escape to a place where no one could see her, but there was nowhere to go. All she could do was run again with no destination, until she found a hidden corner where she could sit and let the tears flow. The following days were even crueler. Hunger began to ravage her body relentlessly. Her clothes no longer protected her from the cold nights, and her skin was marked by the sun and accumulated dirt. Every attempt to ask for help ended in humiliation, as if the world was determined to punish her for something she hadn't done. Madison began to avoid crowded streets, preferring alleys and abandoned places where she could at least hide from the cruel words. In one of those alleys, she found a cardboard box and sat down, hugging her knees while looking up at the sky. The stars shone distant, untouchable, and Madison felt a profound sadness. Would she ever feel loved and safe again? She didn't know. All she knew was that she needed to survive, even though the world seemed to be constantly trying to destroy her. Still, amid the pain and hunger, Madison held tightly to one thing her grandfather had taught her: her kindness, because even if the world was cruel, she wouldn't let them take away what was purest inside her. Madison had no more strength left. Days of hunger and humiliation had left her body weak and her soul even more worn out. Despite all the pain Vincent had already caused her, she knew she had no other choice. The mansion, which had once been a symbol of coldness and control, now seemed her only chance to find shelter, food, and perhaps a last shred of hope. With faltering steps, she walked to the gate of the immense property, feeling her heart race with each step. Her face was dirty, her knees bruised, and her now tattered clothes barely protected her from the chill of the night. Madison rang the bell with trembling hands, the sound echoing like a blow to her ears. She waited, clutching her arms against her body as the cold wind cut her skin. When the door finally opened, Vincent appeared, wearing a silk robe and holding a drink. His gaze fell on his daughter as if she were a stain on his sight. "What are you doing here?" Vincent asked, his voice laden with contempt. He took a step forward, eyeing her up and down with an expression that mixed irritation and revulsion. "Look at you, Madison. You're filthy. It seems you finally found the place you belong, on the streets." Madison swallowed hard, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. She clasped her hands together in a desperate gesture and spoke in a weak, almost inaudible voice. "Dad, please, I have nowhere else to go. I just want something to eat. Can I stay here for one night, just for today? I promise I won't bother you." Vincent let out a bitter laugh, leaning slightly to look her in the eye. "You think you can come back here after everything? Madison, you chose the path you wanted. Now reap the fruits. This house is no longer yours. You left because you wanted to be a saint, help the poor, and defy my orders. So go find solace with the wretches you love so much." Before Madison could respond, Wesley appeared in the hallway, drawn by the voices. He was dressed in expensive clothes and wore a cruel smile on his lips. "Who's there, father?" "Ah, it's her. The prodigal daughter has returned." He laughed, approaching to get a better look at Madison's state. "My God, look at you. You're worse than the beggars we find on the street. I don't even know how you had the nerve to show up here like this." Madison lowered her head, feeling her face burn with shame. Wesley's words were like knives cutting every piece of her dignity. "Please, I just want a chance. I have no one else." Vincent cut her off with an abrupt gesture, swirling his drink as if the conversation was a waste of time. "Enough, Madison. I've lost my patience. You're embarrassing me in front of Wesley." He looked at his adopted son and added with an ironic smile, "You know I should have done this sooner, thrown cold water to clean up the filth she carries." Wesley laughed loudly, shaking his head. "That would be fun, father. Let's do it. Maybe she'll learn that she can't come crawling back whenever things get tough." Madison raised her gaze, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to scream, to tell Vincent he was wrong, but she had no strength left. Every word he uttered, every laugh from Wesley, weighed like a ton on her shoulders. Vincent took a step back, as if he were actually considering the idea, but at the last moment he merely pointed towards the gate. "Get out of here, Madison. And don't come back. You're no longer my daughter, and this house is no place for someone like you." Madison felt her chest tighten as if there was no more air to breathe. She looked at Vincent one last time, hoping to find some compassion, but all she saw was coldness and contempt. Without saying another word, she turned and walked out of the gate, silent sobs shaking her body as the mansion disappeared behind her. That night, as she huddled in a dark corner of some alley, Madison felt the void inside her grow. Vincent and Wesley had destroyed what little hope she still carried, but even so, she promised herself she would survive. Not for them, but for who she was and what her grandfather had taught her. Even if she was alone, even if the world was cruel, Madison knew her kindness was the only thing no one could take from her. The night was cold, and Madison was huddled in a corner of the sidewalk, trying to find some comfort under the thin blanket she had found in a trash can. The wind cut through her skin, and her empty stomach seemed like a pain that would never pass. Her eyes were closed, but sleep was restless, interrupted by the distant noise of the city and the memories of the day. She tried to find solace in thoughts of her grandfather, the words he always said about never giving up. But that night, even that seemed distant. It was then that she heard the sound of a car stopping nearby. It wasn't just any car, but a limousine, the engine purring softly as the lights illuminated the corner where she was. Madison sat up, confused, and with her heart racing, wondering if she might be dreaming. When the car door opened, she saw a familiar figure stepping out. It was Levi, the man she had met as a beggar, but now he was impeccably dressed, in a well-cut suit and a warm expression. "Levi?" Madison murmured, rubbing her eyes, unable to believe what she saw. She was dirty, exhausted, and he looked like he had stepped out of a dream. "What are you doing here? How are you in a limousine?" Levi walked up to her, kneeling down so they were at the same level. His smile was gentle, but his eyes showed he understood her confusion. "Madison, I came to look for you. I found out what happened and knew you would need help. And I think it's time to tell the truth. I'm not exactly who you think I am." Madison blinked, even more confused. "What do you mean? You were a beggar. You were on the streets." Levi sighed, sitting down next to her on the sidewalk, unconcerned with the dirt. "I pretended to be a beggar, Madison. It was something I needed to do to understand people and become a better person. Actually, I own that chain of fancy restaurants you saw in the city. I spent some time on the streets to learn empathy, to understand what people really face. And that's how I met you." Levi's words left Madison breathless. She looked at him, trying to find any lie on his face, but all she saw was sincerity. "You own the restaurants? But why? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" "Because, Madison, I've been in your shoes too," Levi said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I was born poor and my life wasn't easy at all. I fought hard to get where I am, but along the way I realized I was losing something important, empathy for people. So I decided to go back to the streets for a while, to remember where I came from and never forget who I am." Madison felt tears streaming down her face, but this time they weren't of sadness. It was a mix of relief and gratitude. "You came here for me? Why would you do that? I'm no one." Levi took Madison's hands, looking directly into her eyes. "You're so much more than you think, Madison. Your kindness, even in the face of everything you've been through, is something rare. I couldn't just leave you here. Now come with me. I want you to have a chance to start over." He helped Madison up, and she entered the limousine hesitantly. During the ride, she looked around, still in shock at the luxury and the comforting warmth of the car. When they arrived at Levi's house, a large and welcoming residence surrounded by trees, Madison was in awe. It was different from Vincent's cold, oppressive mansion. There was something genuine about this place, as if every corner exuded comfort and security. As she entered, Madison saw a boy her age running through the living room with a toy in his hands. He stopped when he saw her and smiled shyly. "Hi, are you Levi's new friend?" he asked, curiosity in his eyes. Levi placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and smiled. "Madison, this is Oliver. I adopted him a few months ago. He also came from the streets, and now we're building a life together. I want him to have everything I didn't have, and I want you to have that too." Madison felt her heart warm as she saw the joy in Oliver's eyes. "Hi, Oliver," she said, with a small but sincere smile. "I guess so. I guess we're friends now." Levi took her to the kitchen, where he prepared a plate of food. It was a simple meal, but to Madison it seemed like a feast. Every bite was a relief from the hunger that seemed endless. She ate slowly, as if savoring not only the food, but also the feeling of being cared for, of not being alone. Levi and Oliver sat with her, talking about simple things, but every word helped ease the weight she carried. When she finished eating, Levi led her to a comfortable room with a soft bed and clean clothes on the comforter. Madison looked around the space with teary eyes. "Thank you, Levi, for everything. I don't even know how to thank you." Levi smiled, holding her shoulders. "You don't need to thank me, Madison. Just promise you'll never let the world take away your kindness. You're stronger than you think, and now you have a place where you can be who you really are." Madison lay down on the bed and for the first time in weeks felt safe. As she closed her eyes, she couldn't help the smile forming on her face. Maybe there was still kindness in the world, and now she had a new chance to find happiness. That night, Madison slept deeply, her heart full of hope and the promise of a better future. The morning sun gently lit the room where Madison slept. It was the most peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks, but her body was tired, still weakened by the hard days on the street. When she woke up, she felt a slight dizziness when sitting up in bed. She thought it was just fatigue, but something in her body didn't seem right. Still, she decided to ignore the discomfort. There was something comforting about being in a safe place, and she didn't want to worry Levi. Descending the stairs with careful steps, she found Levi and Oliver in the living room playing a board game. The sight brought a smile to Madison's face, but she still felt strangely weak. Levi noticed immediately. "Good morning, Madison. You look a little pale. Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine," she replied in a low voice, trying to sound convincing. "I'm just a little tired, I think. I need to get used to sleeping in a real bed again." She forced a smile, but Levi frowned, clearly worried. As Oliver spoke animatedly about the game, Madison began to feel the room spinning. The heat in her face seemed to rise rapidly, and her ears buzzed, as if the sound around her was distorting. She tried to grab the edge of the table to steady herself, but her hands slipped. Levi saw when her knees gave out and stood up quickly. "Madison!" he shouted, running to her as the girl's body fell to the floor. He caught her before she hit her head, but her eyes were already closed. "Madison, answer me, Madison!" Oliver watched in silence, frightened, as Levi checked her breathing and picked her up in his arms. "Oliver, stay here at home." "I'm taking Madison to the hospital now. Don't worry, everything will be okay," Levi said, trying to stay calm, but his voice betrayed his concern. He carried Madison carefully to the car and drove off at high speed, driving as if his own life depended on it. At the hospital, doctors and nurses acted quickly. Levi explained what he knew. She was on the streets, not eating properly for weeks. She must be very weak. Please do something. He refused to leave the waiting room, pacing back and forth, his hands clenched and his eyes fixed on the door where they had taken Madison. Time seemed to drag on. Every minute felt like an eternity, but finally a doctor came out of the room, still wearing his lab coat. "She's stable," he said reassuringly, "but her condition is the result of severe malnutrition and exhaustion. We'll need to monitor her closely over the next few hours to ensure there are no complications." Levi let out a sigh of relief, but the weight in his chest hadn't completely diminished. He followed the doctor to the room where Madison was lying in bed, hooked up to an IV. She looked so small and fragile at that moment that Levi felt a lump in his throat. Sitting by the bed, he gently held her hand. "You're going to be okay, Madison, I promise. No matter what happens, I'll take care of you," he said softly, as if speaking to her and to himself. As he watched her breathe gently, Levi knew he would do everything in his power to ensure Madison never again faced the hardships that had brought her to this point. As Levi waited in the hospital, with Madison still unconscious and hooked up to tubes and machines, the doctor returned to the room with a worried expression. He held the clipboard firmly and spoke in a serious tone. "Mr. Levi, Madison's situation is more serious than we thought. She's facing a very strong infection, probably caused by the precarious conditions she lived in over the past few weeks. Her body is weak and malnourished, and her immunity is practically non-existent. We're doing everything we can with antibiotics and hydration, but the most important factor will be a healthy and peaceful recovery environment." Levi felt his heart tighten at those words. He wasn't Madison's father, but at that moment he felt more responsible for her than her own father had ever been. The thought that she was there because she had been abandoned gave him no rest. Levi left the hospital with a burning determination. With every mile he drove towards Vincent's mansion, the indignation grew inside him. It was inconceivable that someone could treat their own daughter with such neglect. When he arrived at the imposing gates of the property, he wasted no time waiting to be announced. He passed through the gates as soon as they opened, hastily parking his car. As he entered the house, he found Vincent in the living room, a drink in his hand, and the same usual disdainful air. Wesley was beside him, flipping through an expensive magazine, but both turned to Levi when he abruptly entered. Vincent rose slowly from his leather armchair, frowning as he recognized Levi, who had entered without being announced. The surprise on his face quickly gave way to an expression of irritation, typical of someone who believed himself untouchable in his own home. "What are you doing here, Levi? Who gave you permission to invade my house like this?" His voice was cold, as if Levi were just another annoyance in the luxurious routine he led. Wesley, sitting beside his father with a magazine in his hands, raised his eyebrows when he saw Levi, but soon let out a mischievous smile, anticipating what he thought would be an entertaining confrontation. Levi, for his part, did not back down. He took a few steps forward, his face filled with the indignation he could barely contain. His eyes were fixed on Vincent with an intensity that made even Wesley squirm in his chair. "I don't need permission to speak about Madison, your daughter, whom you abandoned to fend for herself on the streets." Levi's voice was firm, almost trembling with anger, but full of control, as if he were saving each word for the right moment. "She's in the hospital, Vincent, fighting an infection that nearly killed her, and all because you decided she wasn't good enough to live under the same roof as you." Vincent crossed his arms, laughing bitterly as he took a step forward. "Madison? You came here because of that ingrate? She made her choice, Levi. She wanted to live like a beggar. She wanted to disobey me. Now she's reaping what she sowed. Don't come at me with moral lessons about a girl who never had the strength to carry this surname." His voice was laden with disdain, and the cold smile on his face made Levi's blood boil even more. "She chose to disobey because you are unable to see value in anything beyond money," Levi retorted, his voice rising but still controlled. "You are so blinded by your arrogance that you cannot see how much you are destroying everything around you. Madison is everything you have never been, strong, kind, and capable of making a difference in the world. You rejected her because you couldn't bear to see someone more human than yourself." Wesley laughed loudly, interrupting the moment with his usual sarcasm. "Ah, so Levi is now the defender of the weak and oppressed? Very poetic, but perhaps you should spend that energy elsewhere. It's not like your opinion matters here." Levi turned slowly towards Wesley, his eyes shining with controlled fury. "You can laugh now, Wesley, but the world does not revolve around your arrogance. I know what you both think of me, but that's about to change." He turned back to Vincent, approaching with firm steps. "Do you know who I am, Vincent? I'm the owner of the most expensive restaurant chain in this city, the very same one you probably frequent, spending small fortunes without even realizing it. You thought I was just another ordinary man, someone you could ignore. But I built everything I have from scratch with hard work and empathy. And that's what sets me apart from you." The impact of Levi's words was immediate. Vincent's eyes widened, his expression of superiority slowly crumbling as the truth sank in. "You, the restaurant owner? That's impossible," he muttered, taking a slight step back. Wesley, on the other hand, dropped the magazine he was holding, looking equally shocked. Levi seized the moment to advance even further, his voice full of strength and conviction. "Yes, I am the owner. And you know what brought me to where I am? My ability to see people for who they are, not what they have. That's what made me a real man, Vincent, something you will never be. Your wealth is empty, just like you. And now, not only have you abandoned your daughter, but you've also put her life at risk. This will not go unpunished." Vincent tried to recompose himself, but his voice sounded hesitant, as if he was losing control of the situation. I didn't know you were that kind of man, Levi. But that doesn't change the fact that Madison made her choices. She was always a disappointment, someone who didn't fit the standards of this family. Levi shook his head, unable to believe Vincent's level of coldness. You really believe you're upholding some kind of standard, Vincent? What you're defending is your own inability to love. You've lost your daughter, and now you have no one left by your side. When justice catches up with you, and it will, you'll realize that your loneliness was created by you alone. Wesley tried to intervene again, but this time his voice lacked its usual sarcastic tone. Father, he can't be serious. Can he? But Vincent didn't respond. He seemed lost, as if Levi's words had struck a chord inside him that he never wanted to face. Levi took one last step forward, looking directly into Vincent's eyes. The police are already keeping an eye on you, Vincent. And I assure you that superiority mask of yours won't protect you. Madison deserves justice, and she will have it. And when you're alone, with only your cold walls to keep you company, I hope you reflect on what you've lost. Without waiting for a response, Levi turned and walked away, leaving Vincent and Wesley in silence. As he walked back to his car, he felt a mixture of relief and indignation. Relief for finally having said everything he needed to, but indignation at the fact that Vincent had still shown no sign of remorse. However, Levi knew that justice was on its way, and his focus now was Madison. He drove back to the hospital, promising himself that no matter what happened, he would be there for her, as he always had been. Levi drove straight to the police station, still consumed by anger and indignation after the confrontation with Vincent. He could no longer allow that man to continue acting with such cruelty, not only towards Madison, but towards everyone around him. When he arrived, he rushed in, his heart still racing. The police station was bustling with officers circulating and people being attended to. Levi went straight to the counter and asked to speak with the person in charge. After a brief wait, a detective led him to a small, well-lit room, where Levi explained everything. How Vincent had abandoned Madison, kicking her out of the house, and how she was now fighting for her life in the hospital due to the conditions she faced on the streets. He described Vincent's disdain, the way he treated his daughter as if she were a burden, and the lack of any parental responsibility. This man is a danger to everyone around him, Levi concluded, his voice firm. He has destroyed his daughter's life and feels no remorse. The detective listened attentively, taking notes as Levi spoke. When he finished, the detective let out a sigh and crossed his arms. We already had some complaints against Vincent, the officer said, his tone serious. Reports of mistreatment against employees, including verbal abuse. But what you've brought us is grave. We will act immediately. Justice may be slow, but it never fails. Levi felt a spark of relief upon hearing those words. He knew the process would be long, but at least now there was a path to hold Vincent accountable. After signing his formal complaint, Levi left the police station with a sense of duty accomplished. However, his mind was still on Madison. He needed to return to the hospital. When he arrived at the hospital, he found a scene that made his heart stop. The monitors next to Madison's bed were beeping frantically, and nurses and doctors were rushing to stabilize her. Levi was paralyzed for a moment, unable to process what was happening. He slowly approached the room's window, watching as the doctors worked urgently. A nurse rushed out of the room, but Levi managed to intercept her. What's happening? Is she getting worse? He asked, his voice trembling with concern. The nurse hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, but replied, The infection has worsened, and her body is very weak. We're doing everything we can, but it's a critical situation. We need to act fast. Levi felt the ground disappear from under his feet the moment the nurse explained Madison's state. It was as if the air had been ripped from his lungs, leaving him unable to think or react. He leaned against the cold wall of the corridor, trying to control the despair that spread through his body, like an electric current. His eyes were fixed on the closed door of the room, while the sound of the beeping monitors echoed in his mind like a cruel reminder that he could lose her. No, he couldn't lose Madison, not after everything she had faced and overcome. Not now, when she finally had someone to take care of her. Closing his eyes, Levi tried to calm his breathing, but memories of Madison surged powerfully, as if his mind were begging to hold on to her somehow. He remembered when he first found her on the street, lost and fragile, but with a kindness that radiated even in the face of her pain. He remembered the moment she offered a shy smile, despite everything she had endured, and how she still believed in the best in people. That was Madison, someone who, even broken, never lost the ability to be good. He couldn't let her go. He couldn't allow the world to lose someone so precious. "You're going to survive, Madison. You have to survive," Levi whispered to himself, his hands trembling as he made the silent promise. He knew she needed to hear that, even from afar. It was almost as if he was sending his strength to her, hoping she could feel it through the hospital walls. The minutes that followed were the longest of Levi's life. Every second seemed like an eternity, and he found himself pacing back and forth in the hallway, unable to stand still. His sweaty hands clenched into fists, his eyes fixed on the door as if he could pass through it with his mind. When the doctor finally came out, with a tired but calm expression, Levi practically ran towards him, anxiety overflowing in his voice. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked, almost breathless. He didn't know what to expect, but every word from the doctor was like a thread of hope that he clung to desperately. The doctor sighed, but there was a small smile on his face, enough to relieve the crushing tension Levi felt. "It was close, but we managed to stabilize her," he said in a reassuring tone. "Madison is a strong girl, stronger than she looks. Now the most important thing is to continue the treatment and ensure that she gets the rest she needs to fully recover." The words sank into Levi like a balm, replacing fear with such intense relief that he could barely contain his tears. Levi repeatedly thanked the doctor, his voice choked with emotion. He needed a few seconds to compose himself before entering the room, where he found Madison lying in bed, still pale, but with her breathing more regular. The steady sound of the heart monitor was a reminder that she was alive, fighting. When her eyes opened slightly, she tried to smile, the small gesture filled with meaning. "You came back," she murmured, her voice weak but laden with emotion. Levi felt his throat tighten as he carefully held her hand as if afraid of hurting her further. "I never left, Madison. I've been here the whole time, and I'll keep being here. You're strong, stronger than anyone. You made it." His voice was firm but full of tenderness, and he gently squeezed her hand as if he wanted to transfer his strength to her. Madison closed her eyes again, but this time there was a small smile on her face. It was as if, even in that state, she knew she wasn't alone, that someone believed in her and was willing to fight for her. Levi stayed by her side for the rest of the night, sitting in the chair next to the bed, watching every movement, every breath, as if his presence were the only thing capable of keeping her safe. Meanwhile, at the police station, the proceedings against Vincent were being initiated. Levi's reports, combined with previous suspicions, had finally triggered a formal investigation. Vincent would be summoned to testify, and the accounts of mistreatment that had surfaced over the years were being examined. Justice was beginning to move, slow but relentless, like an invisible force destined to bring Vincent face to face with the consequences of his actions. Back at the hospital, Levi looked at Madison as she slept. He felt a wave of relief and gratitude, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. He knew the recovery would be long, but he was determined to ensure that she would never face such suffering again. Justice was being served against Vincent, but for Levi, the true triumph was seeing Madison alive, still fighting, still with a chance to find happiness. He knew she deserved a better future, and he would do everything to help her achieve it. Months had passed since Madison almost lost her life in the hospital. The recovery was slow and challenging, but Levi was by her side every moment. He took care of every detail, ensuring that Madison had the safe and loving environment she so desperately needed. During this time, Levi and Oliver became her new family, giving her something she never knew she could have: a real home. Meanwhile, the investigation against Vincent was progressing rapidly. The police gathered evidence of mistreatment not only against Madison, but also against former employees and other people who had suffered from his abusive behavior. The accumulated reports over the years were finally heard, and Vincent was brought to trial. Levi made sure to be present in court, holding Madison's hand as the judge read the sentence. Vincent was convicted of emotional abuse, abandonment and neglect, receiving a sentence that reflected the severity of his actions. When the verdict was announced, Madison felt a mixture of relief and sadness. It was painful to accept that her own father had been so cruel, but she knew it was the necessary step to move forward. After the trial, Madison finally found the peace she had been seeking. Levi invited her to live with him and Oliver, and she accepted with a shy but genuine smile. Levi's house was full of life, with laughter and love filling every corner. Oliver treated her like an older sister, always pulling her into his games and adventures. Levi, in turn, continued to be the pillar of strength and affection, always encouraging Madison to believe in herself and pursue her dreams. One afternoon, as they were sitting in the living room, Oliver brought up an idea. "Madison, you always talk about helping people. Why don't we do something together? We could start a project to help children like us, who have gone through so many difficulties." Madison looked at him, surprised and touched. "Do you think we can do this? It's such a big dream. But at the same time, it's all I want. I want no one else to go through what I went through." Levi smiled as he heard the conversation and put a hand on Madison's shoulder. "Of course you can, and I'll be here to help with whatever you need. You have an amazing heart, and the world needs more people like you." With Levi's support, Madison and Oliver began planning the project. They called it the House of Hope, a space to welcome children in vulnerable situations. The project grew faster than Madison expected, thanks to her determination and Levi's support, who used his influence and resources to ensure everything was perfect. The place was inaugurated on a sunny day, with children running and playing in the gardens, and Madison couldn't help but smile as she saw the dream become a reality. During the opening, Madison gave an emotional speech. "I know what it's like to feel like the world has turned its back on you, but I also know what it's like to find people who reach out when everything seems lost. Today, we want to be that hand for all the children who need it. This place is a home, a place where you will always be loved and protected." Madison's words drew applause and tears from everyone present, but what mattered most to her was the sparkle in the eyes of the children who already felt at home. Life in the House of Hope brought a new purpose to Madison. She spent her days organizing activities, helping the children with their studies, and offering the love she had always dreamed of receiving. Levi and Oliver were by her side every step of the way, forming a team that complemented each other. Madison realized that her kindness, so often despised by Vincent, was her greatest strength, and now she could use it to transform lives. Meanwhile, Madison's personal life was blossoming. She became an important figure in the community, with people admiring her courage and determination. Many came to her to offer help or simply to share stories of overcoming adversity. Madison learned to feel comfortable with the affection she received, understanding that she deserved all the happiness she was finally experiencing. One night, after a long day at the House of Hope, Madison, Levi, and Oliver were gathered in the living room eating popcorn and watching a movie. Oliver, always full of energy, couldn't stop talking about the children and the new activities they had planned. Madison looked at him, laughing, and then at Levi, who was watching her with a warm smile. "I never imagined my life could be like this," said Madison, her voice laden with emotion. "After everything I went through, I thought I would never be truly happy. But you two showed me that happiness is possible, that love is real. I'll never be able to thank you enough." Levi shook his head, reaching out to hold her hand. "Madison, you don't have to thank us. You're the reason all this happened. Your kindness, your strength, your determination, that's what brought this happiness to all of us, and that's what makes you such a special person." Oliver leaned in to hug Madison, interrupting the conversation with his typical energy. "You're our sister now, Madison, and we'll always be here for you no matter what happens." Madison laughed, hugging Oliver back, as she felt her heart warm with their love and affection. For the first time in a long time, she felt complete. And as she looked at Levi and Oliver, she knew she had finally found the home she had always been looking for. In the following years, the House of Hope continued to grow exponentially, becoming a true beacon for those most in need. The initially small and welcoming space became a vibrant community center, with educational programs, recreational activities, and psychological support for children and adolescents in vulnerable situations. Madison dedicated every moment of her day to the work at the House of Hope, guided by the promise she had made to her grandfather and the desire to honor the kindness she had always carried within her. She became an inspiration to all around her. It wasn't just the children who admired her, but also the volunteers, educators, and even local businessmen who began to financially support the project after seeing the impact Madison was creating. Her story, of a rejected and abandoned girl turned strong and resilient woman, touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. People saw in her the living proof that, even in the face of the worst adversities, it was possible to transform pain into purpose and suffering into love. Alongside Levi and Oliver, Madison found the family she had always longed for but never imagined having. Levi, who had become a true father to her, taught her that the bonds created by love were stronger than any blood tie. Oliver, with his contagious joy, was like the little brother she never had, bringing laughter and lightness to the most challenging days. Together they formed an unbeatable team, each bringing their skills and passions to the project. Levi managed the finances and coordinated partnerships, while Madison led the activities and cared directly for the children. Oliver, now a teenager, was an example for the younger children, showing that it was possible to overcome the past and build a bright future. One morning, while Madison was reviewing the plans for the expansion of the House of Hope, which would include a new dormitory and a library, she received a visit from a local journalist. The man wanted to do a story about the impact of the project on the community. During the interview, Madison spoke with the same sincerity that had always characterized her. The House of Hope is not just a physical place. It's a symbol that no one is alone. We all face difficulties, but what really matters is what we do with them. Choosing compassion, even when the world seems cruel, is the greatest act of courage we can perform. The story was published in newspapers and websites around the city, and the impact was immediate. Local businesses began to offer to collaborate, while ordinary people sent donations or signed up as volunteers. Madison's project became a movement, proving that kindness is contagious. She was often invited to give talks at schools and community events, where she shared her story with the goal of inspiring others to follow the same path of compassion and resilience. Vincent, now in prison, was no longer part of Madison's life. News of the expansion of the House of Hope eventually reached him, but his influence over her had completely disappeared. The world he knew, based on control and coldness, was distant from the one Madison had created. Vincent spent his days reflecting on the choices that had led him to loneliness. He saw from afar his daughter's success and, for the first time, began to understand what he had lost. However, Madison harbored no resentment. Instead, she chose to use her experience as a constant reminder that there is always a choice between cruelty and compassion. By choosing compassion, she found freedom and happiness. At one of the annual House of Hope events, Madison took the stage to thank the supporters and share the year's achievements. Her voice trembled slightly with emotion as she looked out at the audience, which included children, families, and collaborators. This place is not just my dream, but the dream of every child who deserves a better future. All of you, by being here today, are part of that dream. Together, we are proving that love is stronger than any adversity. The audience rose to their feet in applause, but what touched Madison most were the smiles of the children she helped daily. Seeing those hopeful, joyful faces was the most precious reward she could receive. After the event, a little girl ran up to her and grabbed her hand. "Madison, I want to be just like you when I grow up. I want to help people like you helped me." The girl's words made Madison kneel down to her level and respond with tears in her eyes. "You already are an inspiration, my dear, and I know you will do amazing things." The impact of the House of Hope transcended the boundaries of the local community. The project began to receive recognition in other regions, attracting national attention. Madison and Levi were invited onto a television program where they could share more about their journey and future plans for the project. Madison, ever humble, emphasized that the real success came from the children and the team, working tirelessly to give them a better life. "Every smile we see here is a victory. Every child who finds their way is proof that we are on the right path." Oliver, now 18, decided to study business administration to further help with the expansion of the House of Hope. "I want to ensure that Madison and Levi's work continues to grow," he said at one of the family meetings. Levi beamed with pride, while Madison felt her heart warm to see how Oliver had grown into a generous and committed person. In the end, Madison not only survived, she thrived. Her journey showed the world that true strength lies in love, kindness, and the courage to never give up, even when all seems lost. Alongside Levi and Oliver, she lived a life full of purpose, happiness, and, above all, love. The House of Hope became a legacy that would touch future generations. But for Madison, the greatest gift was knowing that even in the direst circumstances, she had chosen love. And that choice had transformed not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. Did you like the story of Madison and Levi? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on the screen. I'll be waiting for you there.